My wife went on a blind date. What is going on? I think the best way to begin is by giving some background about us. My name is Tomas, 46M, and I've been married to my high school sweetheart, Margot, 45F, for decades. We've been together for 32 years, and our story goes all the way back to kindergarten at Upson Elementary. By the 8th grade, we started dating, and we've been inseparable ever since. There's a sense of pride I carry with that fact. We've never taken a break, and this isn't a second chance for us. It's been continuous, boyfriend and girlfriend, then engaged, and now married. We tied the knot right after college when we were both 23. I went into accounting and landed a good job at a firm. Later, I started my own practice after we moved to Rochester. Margot, on the other hand, has been teaching 3rd or 4th grade for the past 22 years. Over the years, we've built a wonderful life together, including raising 2 amazing kids. Our daughter, Veronica, 21F, was born just after we got married, and our son, Tom, 19M, came along 2 years later. Our lives have been what you might call the classic American dream. We're financially stable, haven't had any serious money worries in over a decade. We've got a solid savings cushion, and both of us are on track to retire in about 10 years. We even have that stereotypical RV tour across the country planned for when the time comes. We've supported each other through thick and thin for over 3 decades. Sure, there were some bumps along the way. Every marriage has them. But there's never been anything major, nothing that shook us to our core. We've stayed fit and active, maintained friendships with several other couples, and even kept a decent level of intimacy in our relationship. Things aren't quite like they were in our 20s, but our bedroom life is far from dead. All in all, it's been a life to be proud of, but now I find myself questioning everything because of what happened last night. Everything seemed normal leading up to it. Yesterday was just another typical workday. Margot and I both came home at our usual times. She got in a bit earlier than me and hopped in the shower. That was unusual for her routine, but I didn't think much of it. While she was upstairs, I decided to start dinner. I'd picked up a couple of sirloins earlier, and I thought they'd pair nicely with some au gratin potatoes and asparagus. As I was finishing up, I want to let her know dinner was ready. When I entered our bedroom, there she was, sitting at her vanity. The room smelled faintly of her favorite perfume, and I could tell she'd put a lot of effort into her appearance. Her hair, usually simple and practical, was styled into soft curls that framed her face beautifully. She was wearing a matching lace bra and panties, something she didn't usually do unless it was a special occasion. "Hey, dinner's ready. Did I forget something? Do we have plans tonight?" I asked. Without turning around, she continued applying her makeup and casually said, "No, just me. I'm going on a blind date tonight." At first, I laughed, assuming she was joking. "Okay, very funny," I replied. "Dinner's ready. Come down when you're done." I went back to the kitchen, plating our food and setting up the table with a candle and 2 glasses of wine. It wasn't long before Margot walked in, but instead of sitting down, she stunned me. She was wearing an elegant black dress that hugged her figure in all the right places, with her hair and makeup done to perfection. She looked incredible. "I told you," she said, holding up a small clutch. "I'm going on a date. You didn't need to make me a plate." Confused, I tried to brush it off. "Stop joking around," I said. But she wasn't joking. "It's not nonsense," she replied. "I'll be back in a few hours. Don't wait up." And just like that, she turned and left. I sat there in shock, barely comprehending what had just happened. After a few moments, I got up and went to the door, only to see her car pulling out of the driveway. She even gave me a little wave as she drove away. Completely stunned, I grabbed my phone. We've had location sharing enabled for years, so I tracked her. Sure enough, she drove to Red, one of our favorite restaurants. It became clear this wasn't a joke. She was really on a date. I tried calling her 4 times, but she didn't answer. I even sent her a text saying I was coming down to the restaurant, but her reply stopped me in my tracks. "Don't do that. I told you what I was doing. We can talk when I get home." For the next couple of hours, I stewed in disbelief. My mind kept racing. Who was she meeting? Why was she doing this? Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and went to the guest bedroom to lie down. She came home around 11:30. I pretended to be asleep as she entered the room. "Why are you in here?" she asked. I turned to face her, holding back tears. "Come to bed. she said. I followed her back to our room, silently unzipping her dress when she asked. The whole time I felt like I was in a fog. Finally, I managed to ask, "Where did you go?" "Red," she replied, as casually as if it were any other night out. It was great, though I probably should have stuck to one drink. But I had two. The nonchalance in her voice crushed me. "Who did you meet?" I asked. She smiled slightly. "Ben Smith. He's my friend Anna's cousin. She set us up. He's handsome and charming. We had a nice time. I could hardly believe my ears." "What about after dinner?" I pressed. "Oh, nothing much. We sat in his car and talked," she said while removing her makeup. I felt like my chest was caving in. "Is that all?" She shrugged, changing into her pajamas. He kissed me, and we made out a little. "That's it. We're going out again next Friday, so don't plan anything for the two of us." I was left shattered. My wife, the woman I'd loved and supported for 32 years, was casually stepping out of our marriage. And worse, she didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with it. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't just go on like nothing had changed. This has been one of the strangest and most challenging periods of my life. My wife, Margot, has been dating a man named Ben Smith, who runs a power washing business, for the past month. At first, it was just dinner dates, 4 of them to be exact. Then, this past Friday, she told me she wasn't coming home because she planned to spend the night at Ben's place. When she returned yesterday around noon, I asked her what she had done. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind and said, in a confused tone, "I spent the night at Ben's." I pressed further, my voice heavy with accusation. "Doing what?" Still feigning confusion, she glanced around before replying. "We had sex twice." It felt like a dagger to the heart. So, she'd found her man. I shook my head and walked away, trying to process the sting of her words. She followed after me and, with a casual tone, asked if something was wrong. All I could muster was, "No, I know where I stand." She responded with a matter-of-fact explanation. "I'm sorry you're feeling this way. It wasn't the first time. I kind of assumed you knew. If you want to talk about it, I'm here." Why on earth would I want to discuss another man sleeping with my wife? I simply told her no and went about my day. But that wasn't even the worst of it. She left again today, this time for a date with someone else. She mentioned yesterday that she's going out with Ben again next Friday, but today it's a different guy. And not just any guy, it's Dan Scott, the guy I bought my last 2 vehicles from. You can bet those are the last cars I'll ever buy from him. The confusion is eating me alive. If Ben isn't the one, why sleep with him last Friday and already plan another date? And now she's exploring someone new? What's even more bewildering is how she continues to treat me. She's been acting like she wants to rekindle our marriage. Actually, like she's trying harder than she ever did before. I'll admit things had gotten stale between us before all this. We weren't unhappy, but life had fallen into a predictable routine. I thought we still loved each other, but now I'm questioning everything. Maybe she loves me, but isn't in love with me anymore. Oddly enough, this past month, she's been coming on to me more than ever, 4 or 5 times a week. I know she's out there trying to find my replacement, but I'm not exactly turning her down either. And on top of that, she's making plans with me. Last week, we went to the theater. She bought tickets for a Bills game. She's putting in so much effort to connect, which makes no sense if she's actively trying to replace me. I can't help but wonder if she has an ulterior motive. Maybe she wants me to be the one to end things, so I look like the bad guy. Well, I'm not going to give her that satisfaction. And if she wants to keep inviting me to do things or initiating intimacy, I'm going to play along. In the meantime, I've been doing my own thing. I'm not sitting at home wallowing in self-pity while she's out. I've been hitting bars, going axe throwing, and hanging out with friends. I'm making sure I keep busy. Still, the loneliness creeps in when she's out. It's not just that she's looking for someone new. It's that I'm not looking for anyone to replace her. I don't even want to replace her. But it feels like I don't have a choice in the matter. She's actively dating, and at some point, I guess I'll have to do the same. The thought terrifies me. I've never been on a real date in my life. Margot and I started dating in 8th grade. I passed her a note asking if she wanted to go out with me, and she nodded. That was it. We exchanged home phone numbers, went out a few times, and that was that. I've never had to get to know someone new. And then there are all these other questions swirling in my head. How does dating even work now? Do I need to use a condom? Is Margot using one when she's with Ben or Dan? The thought makes my stomach turn. I don't know where this is heading, but I can feel the clock ticking. At some point, Margot will leave for good when she finds the right guy. And I'm scared of ending up alone, bitter, and sitting in a one-bedroom apartment, waiting for life to pass me by. Maybe I need to put myself out there and figure out what modern women are looking for. I just wish I had a clearer picture of what the future holds. 6 months ago, my wife, Margot, decided to start dating again. It all began with a blind date with a guy named Ben Smith, but it didn't stop there. In fact, her dating life has taken on a rhythm that feels more like an endless carousel than a search for a new partner. What's baffling is that some of these dates seem so fleeting, like her time with Dan Scott. One Sunday, she told me she was going out with Dan, but an hour later, she was back at the house. I assumed the date didn't go well, but now it's become a pattern. Every few weeks, she announces she's going to see Dan, and she's always back within an hour. How do you even build a connection in such a short amount of time? Not that it's my problem, I just find it curious. Despite all this, Margot continues to play the role of a devoted wife. She keeps inviting me on dates, and honestly, I accept most of the time unless I already have plans. I'm not giving up on this marriage before she does, even though it's getting harder to cope. Sometimes I catch myself asking about her plans or what she did while she was out. It's less about curiosity and more about old habits. After 30 years of asking someone about their day, it becomes automatic. But ignorance truly is bliss, and I've learned that lesson the hard way. Some of the things she shared, without hesitation, are burned into my mind. I'll never forget some of the vivid, painful images she's planted there. At this point, I've lost track of how many men she's dated. It must be at least 10 by now, some of them barely older than our daughter. One guy couldn't have been more than 25. I mean, how do you plan to marry someone who's practically the same age as your kid? Speaking of kids, our children remain completely unaware of what's happening. I can't bring myself to tell them about the impending divorce. When they visit or come home for breaks, Margot halts all her extramarital activities and shifts her focus entirely to family time. For now, they haven't noticed anything unusual, and I hope to keep it that way for as long as possible. For the first 4 months, I managed to stay relatively okay. I joined a bowling league, started hanging out with a couple of single guys from work, and even began going out more frequently. But after a while, the loneliness started creeping in. Margot, while still putting in effort at home, continued going out once or twice a week. It began to wear on me, and I guess it showed because one day she suggested I try dating too. She even sent me a link to a dating app called Field. I was hesitant at first, but eventually created a profile. I kept it simple, not knowing what to write. When it didn't yield any matches, Margot decided to step in and help me fill it out. That did the trick. Almost immediately, I matched with a local woman named Emily, who was 41. Emily and I started chatting, and it was intoxicating to connect with someone in that way again. We talked about everything: our jobs, our kids, our shared love for the Buffalo Bills. It was so easy. Emily works as an esthetician and has been in the business for 20 years. She has a 17-year-old son who's a senior in high school. The one rule we've set is to avoid discussing past or current relationships. She made it clear from the start that she didn't want to know if I was seeing other people and wouldn't share her history either. I was perfectly fine with that. Why would I date multiple people at once? You can't build a meaningful connection that way, something Margot could learn from. In the 6 weeks since Emily and I started seeing each other, we've done so many amazing things. Our Friday night dates have become the highlight of my week. Surprisingly, Margot seems genuinely happy for me. It's odd, but I suppose it helps her feel less guilty about her own actions. Maybe seeing Emily and me build something real will inspire her to slow down and settle with someone too. For now, I'm still sleeping in the same bed as Margot, but I can feel that shifting as my relationship with Emily deepens. This isn't how I imagined my life turning out. I always thought Margot and I would grow old together. But if this chapter of my life is closing, at least I know I can build a new future with Emily. Last night was the most humiliating experience of my entire life. Let me explain everything from the start. I've been dating a woman named Emily for about 9 months now. Things between us have been amazing. We see each other at least once a week, usually at my place since my wife, Margot, often stays elsewhere or goes out 1 or 2 nights a week. Emily and I also manage to meet for lunches regularly and talk all day through messages. It's been a refreshing change after the mess of my marriage, where Margot decided she wanted out but has yet to follow through. Meanwhile, she continues acting as if everything is normal. 3 weeks ago, I sat Margot down and told her I could no longer be intimate with her. By then, Emily and I had started saying, "I love you," and it felt wrong to continue being physical with Margot. Surprisingly, Margot was upset and even said this might strain our marriage. A bizarre comment considering how she's been auditioning other men to replace me. Despite this, we've kept up some semblance of normalcy. We still have dinner together occasionally, but I've moved into the guest room. I didn't tell Emily about any of this because she has a strict rule about not discussing past or current relationships. Once, early on, I mentioned Margot and Emily shut it down firmly. I didn't bring it up again. Last week, I asked Emily if she'd like to go on a weekend trip. She said she needed to check her schedule, but later gave me an enthusiastic yes. I was thrilled. I booked a cozy bed and breakfast a few hours away, made reservations at a fancy local restaurant, and planned a weekend full of antique shopping and exploring, a shared passion of ours. We arrived Friday night and had a wonderful evening, starting with dinner at a nice bar and grill. Back in our room, we had an intimate, romantic night. The next day was equally delightful as we wandered through shops and enjoyed each other's company. I'd arranged a surprise for the evening, a horse-drawn carriage ride to take us to dinner. Before the trip, I'd visited a lawyer and had divorce papers prepared to serve Margot on Monday. On the carriage ride, I decided to make my intentions clear to Emily. At 47, I knew what I wanted, a future with her. I told her how much I loved her, how she made me feel alive, and how I saw her as my partner for life. Then I pulled out a diamond ring, got down on one knee, and proposed. Her reaction was not what I expected. Tears filled her eyes, and she asked, "Why are you doing this?" Dumbfounded, I asked what she meant. That's when she dropped the bomb. "I'm married. I love you, but I never intended for this to lead to marriage." My heart sank. "You're married?" I asked, barely believing it. She seemed genuinely surprised by my reaction. "Yes, of course. How didn't you know? Aren't you married too?" I couldn't respond. I jumped out of the carriage in a daze, barely avoiding injury, and started walking back to the inn. Emily called after me, but I ignored her, needing space to process. When I got back, she tried to talk, but I told her to pack her things and not to speak to me. She seemed annoyed and confused, which only made me angrier. For 9 months, she'd been cheating on her husband with me, and now she acted as if this was normal? On the drive home, she said, "I'm in an open marriage. It was in my bio when you first messaged me. You're in one too, right?" I was stunned. I haven't felt married since my wife started looking for my replacement. I'm serving her divorce papers on Monday. I thought you were my future. With that, I dropped her off and drove home. When I arrived, there was a strange car in the driveway. Exhausted, I just wanted to crash in the guest room. Inside, I found Margot in lingerie with another couple, drinking wine. As I tried to slip past, she called out, "Tomas, what are you doing here? Where's Emily? Wasn't this your big weekend?" Seeing her and her guests in that setting broke something in me. I let out a pained sob, and Margot, alarmed, rushed to hug me. The guests awkwardly stood to leave, but I blurted she was cheating on her husband. Margot looked confused. "What do you mean? Isn't she in an open marriage like us? You met on field." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She said the same thing. I replied bitterly. "But what's the point of communication if you just do whatever you want? You asked for an open marriage and then immediately started dating Ben Smith. You made me feel like a placeholder." Margot's expression changed to one of deep concern. "Tomas, what do you think an open marriage is?" "Being honest about your feelings," I said, completely clueless. She took a step back, her face a mix of disbelief and pity. "No, Tomas. It means we agreed we could date and have relationships with others while staying married." I was floored. All this time, I'd misunderstood everything. Margot explained she'd only wanted us to explore new experiences because we'd been together since 8th grade. She never intended to replace me. The awkwardness grew unbearable as her guests awkwardly cleared their throats and left, muttering, "Oh my God," as they walked out. That night, Margot and I had the longest conversation of our lives. I admitted I didn't understand what I'd agreed to and told her about the divorce papers and my failed proposal. She was hurt, but asked if we could try couples counseling. She even suggested I move back into the bedroom, a small gesture that felt like a step toward reconciliation. Now, I'm left to reflect on the chaos I've caused. How did I not figure out what an open marriage was in over a year? Why didn't I speak up when I felt hurt or confused? Part of me feels betrayed, but another part knows I agreed to this and didn't voice my concerns. For now, I've decided to stop the divorce proceedings. Margot and I both want to close the chapter on the open marriage and see if our relationship can heal. I'll send Emily an apology. It's the least I can do, but I don't see us moving forward. Life feels surreal right now. I'm embarrassed, hurt, and unsure of what the future holds. But at least Margot and I are trying to move forward.